I think there's an entire aspect of younger people's lives. I would say millennial and down.
Yeah.
We spend such a big part of our lives online. It's not just on the phone. It's the fact that you develop an entire lingo for participating in online culture. There's the memes, there's the hashtags, there's the way you communicate. Like I was texting over like the text messages started when I was a teenager. So like you develop an entire like way to write texts
So
that
is
are
this a
not.
cautionary tale for parents saying if you let your teenager have a phone, they're going to turn out like Amanda Quintero? Look at this. Look what she's written and her first
I
story in here, and she's willing
I
to
I
share this.
I
Let
cannot make
that be
that
a warning.
I cannot make that promise or warning. I can just say it's something that is a fact of life.
I am talking once again with Amanda Quintero Aguirre, and I had it right a minute ago. Aguilera, is that sort of right?
Aguerrevere.
Oh, Aguilera. I was thinking if I was your agent and you were an actress, I'd just say go with Amanda Quintero.
Yeah, that's what I usually
I
do.
mean, it's so easy to say Amanda Quintero and it sounds so cool. And by the time you add the last name, it's like, okay, can we pronounce it correctly or not? So I'm just going to call you Amanda Quintero and we'll hype the title of your book, which is Unfiltered from the Feed to the Page, Stories of Wanderlust. And I'm going to introduce you here. Amanda was on just a few weeks ago, it seems, with another book called We Said Farewell about
That's
her
right.
kind of expatriate experiences. And we got into a lot of politics on that, didn't we, Amanda? Because of the parallels with what happened to you and now what's happening to the United States with Trump and all the rest of this. But this book, Unfiltered, is very different. There's a little section of poetry at the end, but don't be frightened. Poems always scare me. When I read a book is going to have poetry in it, it's like, oh man, I don't know about this. Um, but actually, these very short story vignettes in here are gripping. I really love this book. It's very entertaining, unfiltered from the feed to the page, Stories of Wanderlust. And Amanda's a journalist. So let me introduce her, read off my page here, and then we'll get on with this. My guess is Amanda Quintero. Say your last name.
Aguerrevere.
Okay. Well, you know that. So Amanda Quintero. And her book that's out now and available in the US, correct?
That's global, yes.
Okay. Is called Unfiltered from the Feed to the Page, Stories of Wanderlust. And I guess from the feed is what you're talking about is kind of a journalistic feed. Is that what I'm reading right?
That is from an Instagram feed.
Okay, an
So
Instagram feed. Yeah. Okay. But that kind of thing. You post all sorts of stories, and this is sort of part of that. Amanda has extensive experience in Latin American public policy, global energy markets, and migration. She brings nuanced insight into complex sociological political issues. She's the author of this is the one we're doing today, Unfiltered from the Feed to the Page, Stories of Wanderlust, a collection of 30 bite-sized travel stories, very easy to read, by the way, because they are short, and six poems drawn from years of chaotic, beautiful, and bittersweet adventures around the world. We really like the book. We're going to make it our offering for August, I think, in our book club. So just say that right up front. For our,
amazing.
it
Thank
has to
you.
be read book club. So we will be pushing it again then. This is In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer. I am Frank Schaeffer, and I'm asking you to subscribe right now to my YouTube and In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and to my Substack, It Has to Be Said, at frankschaeffer.substack.com. And this is in August Has to Be Read. So the first thing I want to do is just plug you, Amanda, and say that after our last conversation on your journey out of um, South America to France and all the stories you had to tell about that and getting out of there and why and the whole economy falling apart that you came from in a very kind of self-inflicted wounds and Trump-esque kind of moment. When I finished with you, about an hour later, I was talking to Ernie and I just said, you're one of the smartest and most articulate people I've ever interviewed. I was just so pleased to have you on. and I wanted to have you back. So this is such a great excuse because Unfiltered is a wonderful book. It's very entertaining. I'm going to have you read some bits out of it, but just say that I'll show you where I dog-eared it there. So I've got a lot of passages marked. Um, and it's a very small book. You know, this is something that you could read on a bus ride, or if somebody else is driving on a short drive, or let alone a plane trip. It's a highly entertaining book. Um, it's a book by a woman about being a woman, but as a male, I not only got it, I really enjoyed it. In fact, one of the things I love about this book as a 72-year-old male who's been married a long time is that, and I have children and grandchildren, and you know, in some ways, my life, and this is a compliment, is about as far away from yours as you can get.
Yeah.
I'm a male, you're a female, you're younger, I'm older. I grew up in Switzerland, moved to the States. You're an expat, but you live in France. Your experience of sexuality and being a female are totally different than mine. But here's the weird thing. On a human level, I connected completely with the stories and I found them very entertaining. And some of them entertaining in a sense of like, oh, you know, now I'm looking over the wall into somebody else's garden and taking a look at what her life is like. And I
Great.
read a lot of women authors. I think about 60 to 70% of the authors I interview are women. And I've interviewed a lot of women who are good writers. But I haven't read a book by a woman that's given me such a precise and insight into what it's like to be a woman in today's world. I guess occupying the world that my children and my older grandchildren occupy. So this helps me understand that. So that sounds way too serious for a book that's actually very funny at places. So
Absolutely. I
yeah,
was
so
not
I'm sorry
expecting
for such a long
that.
preamble, but it's a good book. It's a very entertaining read. And you know, people talk all about, well, women's authors and we've got to hear their voices, blah, 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 blah. But in this case, this is a voice worth hearing, not because Amanda's a woman, but because Amanda's a good writer.
Thank you
Doesn't
so much.
Yeah, I really mean it. And it's very entertaining and full of insight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to read some things out loud, but I'm going to just start by reading something myself from the introduction. I was inspired by the cultural moment I came of age in, a time when social media was how we curated our public lives through photogenic travel, avocado toast brunches, and filtered snapshots of our day-to-day lives. And that's really the flavor of the book. So if you look at it, there's love, sex, and substances, and there's like 4 chapters there. People watching and wholesome strangers, and there's another 4 or 5 chapters. Underprepared, mistakes were made. On the move, Paris, New York, last call for Nashville, etc. Lost and found, runaway luggage. Um, you know, sick on the road. Don't eat in the Indian restaurant you ate in London. That was very graphic. I didn't want to know how many times you'd gone to the toilet that night. But I'll tell you what, having come from a Bedouin camp in the desert in Egypt one time, I had a very similar experience and was going to all-night pharmacies trying to get the flow stopped. So I got it, but it was like, okay, enough of that. Vive la France, pigeon perils, a casual stall, etc. Traveling poems. And actually, I've got a poem I want you to read. So see, as someone who fears poems, I bought into yours. So I'm going to start by just talking about a couple things here, and then I'm going to get to read a section. This one comes from one of the early stories, Man Bun Adventures. And you say, I nodded with my eyes closed, choking on my own laughter at the memory of a Sri Lankan comedian who says, having sex all night long is a myth propagated by the R&B industry to keep us tuned into their music beyond the 90s, end quote. And then another little quote from this page here, which describes a sort of a sexual relationship with someone you met. The initial sense of power over him was intoxicating. I might not be a full-time hot girl. I love this sentence, by the way. The initial sense of power over him was intoxicating. I might not be a full-time hot girl, in quotes, but I'm always a 10 when I'm naked. I thought that was great. So you had me at that. I was ready to read the rest of the book with great joy as soon as I read that line. And then okay, I'm going to read this out loud, and I'm not going to make you read it. I'm going to read it. This was so great, and you ended this thing with Things would be so different if we taught boys to thank girls for blowjobs. That's how you end the chapter. It's a short section, and then you have a little note to self: put that on a T-shirt. Thank girls for blowjobs. Thank girls for blowjobs in quotes. Man bun lore, London boy, thank girls for blowjobs, and those are all hashtags. Okay, so
Yeah.
now and you stepped that at the very beginning of your book. So let's just first of all talk about how you wrote this. You sort of self-selected your audience by making that the first chapter. It's like at that point you've lost some people, but you've also gained a big audience. It's like I'm done here. Anybody who wants a T-shirt that says "Thank boys for blowjobs" or "Thank girls for blowjobs." But it brought up a question because your last book, and this is a serious writerly question. Your last book, I think you wrote in Spanish,
Correct.
and then you translated your own work into English.
Correct.
All right. Did you write this book in English because it has a
Yes.
slightly different flavor?
Yes.
Did you say that anywhere in here?
I don't think so. No.
See, I know shit.
But you know what? And
That's
maybe you know this
perceptive.
because
You
you
wrote this in
also,
English.
yeah, because you're also bilingual. I think you know that people have different personalities in their
Yeah.
different languages.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you write so well in English.
Thank you.
And it didn't feel like a translated work. And I wish I had written this. No, see, I said it before I asked you, but I just want to tell my audience that here I am, and I don't speak Spanish, but I knew this book had been written in English because of the way it reads, as
Mm,
opposed to the other book, which was translated. And even though you wrote it and translated it, it didn't read like a book that's written in English. It's a good book.
right.
We Said Farewell is a great book, and it's so important politically and the rest of it. But this is an actual work of literature, and it's because you wrote in the language. It has a
Yeah,
polish.
very different animals. So the way this happened is I started collecting these stories. Actually, there's a story. There's the first story that I can remember. In People Watching, there's Swipe Left and in
Yes,
page 24. This
yes.
is a couple that's going on their first date in Berlin.
Let me
And
just let me look at something a second here
yeah.
because I am not going to let you tell this story, and I'll tell you why. Because I want you to read it,
Oh,
and I want you to read Swipe Left and just read the whole thing, and in whatever voice you want to read it in, because I want to give people flavor of your writing about a story that's not about blowjobs. So we got a wider audience for this bit.
it might be a bit long to read the whole thing
Well,
through, but
read the first page and then tell us the rest of the story. Read Swipe Left, the page one of the story, page 24, if you want.
all right. Swipe left, and every story has one, two, three, and four sections that accompany a typical Instagram post.
Yeah,
A headline, a recommended listen, which is a soundtrack that literally goes with that text. Then the body of the text. Then you have a note to self, which is like what I kept for myself at the end of the story. And then
yeah.
a line of hashtags,
And that's, by the way, how all of them are.
all of them.
That's a setup for everything. And so it's very entertaining because you know what music you should be listening to while you're reading this little thing. And they're all 2 or 3 pages. Some of them are shorter than that.
Yeah.
And so they're very quick reads and very, very texty, messagey. And you recommend music and then you give a little hashtag at the end. So I should have set that up, but that's how the whole book is. And like I said, look, it's not thick and difficult.
Yeah, it's 130 pages.
It's an easy
And
read. So anyway, if you just want to read that page, we'll get a sense of your writing.
all right, so I was contemplating whether choosing a Moroccan restaurant in Berlin was a mistake when I overheard the couple in front of me speak in English. Given my non-existent level of German and the fact that I was not carrying a book, this had the potential to be entertaining. Their body language screamed first date, but something about their match was off. She wore a baby blue top, a mild demeanor, and spoke in a clear American accent. He wore all black, an edgy Berliner haircut, sharp angles, triangular sideburns, and a very short fringe, plus tattoos covering both arms. He spoke with an accent I couldn't place. So I go on to tell the story of me sitting in this random restaurant in
Yeah,
Berlin and
yeah,
watching them. And he starts, like, at some point, I get lost in my food and then I come back and they are having an argument and I get very caught up in their conversation and I start eavesdropping. So I recount
yes,
the story of what's happening in there. And that was the very first time something like this happened that stood out so much that I wanted to capture it. So what I did was I took a picture
yeah,
and I posted it on my Instagram with a little caption, which was a rough version of this story because
yeah,
Instagram allows you to have 2,000 characters at most in one post. So basically, I took that to be a prompt, and for the next, I don't know, 8 years probably, I just did that. Whenever I witnessed something or
yeah,
whenever a fun story came up while I was traveling,
yeah.
I just took
Well, and you
a
say
picture.
he was filming her with his phone while she ate. She looked uncomfortable, covering her eyes and her face with her left palm, sneaking fries into her mouth and asking him to stop. Her voice sounded cute but firm. From my seat, she seemed to be out of his league. Apparently, he knew this because he was trying too hard. She seemed to be cursing the moment she downloaded the dating app that got her in this situation. I just love that. And basically, I'm going to ask you from now on when I'm writing something about women for women, you're going to become one of my consultants. I'm going to just say, I'm going to ask Amanda if this is what actually somebody would do because
I'd be honored.
your observation of this dating thing, and then later you tell a story, a hilarious story, um, again, an overheard conversation set in a laundromat where they're speaking Spanish, and you warn people don't speak Spanish in Paris unless you intend to be overheard by people who speak Spanish, because she's talking about what sort of sex she wants to have with him and her period coming or and wanting to plan to have sex with him without a condom and all this stuff. And you're listening to the whole conversation. And obviously, she doesn't think that people are in the same room who are speaking Spanish. It's like,
Of
oh, well,
course,
I'm speaking in my own language. And I wanted to ask after that story if there was anybody else around there who you saw observing it in a way that you knew they were
not at
understanding
all.
it too.
No, not at all.
Yeah, well, it's a great story, by the way. It's a very funny story. I mean, it's worth the price of the book. Hey, I want to jump down to something that will get us into, and I got to find the place here. Um, that I'm going to read this one because um, it's about having a period and about looking for a tampon. And basically, I'm gonna read this because I'm a guy, and men should be comfortable with this subject. Don't you agree? That's the point of your
Absolutely.
story. So,
Absolutely.
Madrid with Flo is a fantastic story. And you know whether you're a man or a woman, this is such a good little document on people who don't want to talk about periods and bleeding and all the rest of this. Um, I woke to discover it was that time of the month. After 20 plus years of getting my period, this was hardly news. I'm pretty regular. The problem was that I was in a hotel room in a different country with no tampons or pads in my bag. I'd gone to bed late, so I planned an quote efficient morning with just enough time to dress up, have breakfast, and head to the airport. Now I had to figure out the tampon situation. My first reaction was to chastise myself for not packing supplies, but in an effort to be kinder to myself, I put the self negative talk to rest. Why had my period tracking app not notified me? Then I remembered that I had turned off the app notification for fear that one of my male colleagues would accidentally learn about my upcoming period. Fuck that, I thought. I'm turning these notifications on. Every woman bleeds. I bet you half those idiots don't know that vaginas don't have sphincters. I was stressed and angry, and I needed someone to be the object of my resentment. I was tempted to delve into the rabbit hole of why I let my life depend so heavily on a host of Silicon Valley based apps with questionable data protection policies. But blood was starting to leak between my legs, so the rant would have to wait. There were more important things at hand. Okay, so then you tell about how you're going to go outside and you're going to look for a tampon or pads or something, and you're walking with your knees clapped together, et cetera, et cetera. In Madrid, where life starts at 9:30 a.m., I spent 20 minutes finding an open store. God bless those hardworking chinos, the Chinese bodegas that inconspicuously serve the city every other corner for being open. So much for my time to have the expensive hotel breakfast I prepaid. All right, so then you rush upstairs, you get your baggage, you come back downstairs, and here's how you finish the story. And I just think it's priceless. Um, as I was doing the checkout, the male staff member asked the typical, "Everything okay during your stay, ma'am?" I stared at him, squinting. I took a deep breath and said, "You know, for the number of amenities you offer, you should include tampons or sanitary pads. Women also get their periods while traveling." His eyebrows shot up into his skull. He blushed, he gasped, he bit his bottom lip. Then he whispered, "You're right, ma'am. I'll take note." And then you go on, 50% of the world's population isn't a minority. If men got periods, tampons would be considered a human right. Note to self, evangelize whenever possible that women have periods and it must be accepted as a normal part of life. And then underneath you have for your hashtags, hashtag Madrid, hashtag Aunt Flo, hashtag fuck the patriarchy, hashtag normalize periods. So I read that precisely because that is the point of your story. This is all part of a man's world too, because we share the planet. And it's such a good point you've made. And I'm very pleased that's in there because I love the way you wrote about it and you put it into a story. And one thing I love about your book, and then I'm going to shut up and let you talk a lot more, is that um, I finished this book without knowing, and I mean this as a compliment, without knowing whether you're a feminist or not. I'm not talking about the political side. I finished the book knowing that you're a writer who closely observes life around you, but I didn't ever feel I was being preached at. So instead of trying to preach it like on the tampon issue or something, you instead just told a really good story that's so much more effective. That's it. And now we'll just talk about your book. So I don't know what you think about me bringing it up that way, but I really like it.
No, I love it. I love it because I am a feminist and I that's exactly my angle. I don't like to be preached at in
Yeah.
general. So
Yeah.
I don't like to preach on people on the things that I am favorable about. But I do like to tell stories, and I do think stories are very powerful to make a point come across and to
Yeah.
bring it home.
Yeah.
And especially if you can put it in a way that who like any person, just like you said at the beginning, like a white male that has an older generation and lives in another place can connect with it. It means that
Sure.
I managed to create enough empathy
Yeah.
for the story that you are going to see the world in a different way, and that is enough to make the point relevant. And
Exactly.
that's, I mean, it putting it in there is a choice, and it, I mean, I
Yeah,
can
and I
choose
didn't find
not to
any of
say
that
it.
alienating. But the thing is, and I don't want to belabor complimenting you, but that's partly your skill as a writer. You're a really good writer. You know, this is a really beautifully written book, and so it pulls you in because you don't finish it saying, you know, she was trying to make a point, so she made this story up. You allow the story to be this, you know, you put your art first ahead of the ideology, is the way I would put it.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, none of it, because they are, this is what we call creative nonfiction.
Yeah, exactly.
And because it is creative nonfiction, it really, I wasn't really planning. I didn't have an agenda. It's not like, it's the exact opposite of what happened to the other book. The book about Venezuela and We Said Farewell, I had an entire, scheme of what I wanted to say and a logic, and there was, these concepts that I wanted to bring across. Here, they just happened, and what you're listening to in the book is my
Yeah,
voice.
yeah,
It
exactly.
very much in the way it happens in my own head.
Yeah. And well, and you wind up liking you too, because there was a story in there that, again, the skill of being a writer, but also not coming off as preaching. You know, you talk about this travel story where you're observing this couple wrestling with a couple of children. I think they were like 8 and 10, and they have a lot of luggage, and you're sort of being self-critical. And hey, I travel all the time and I know my way around airports and I'm so sophisticated and I'm a woman of the world. And look at these people struggling with kids and all their suitcase. And then you realize you've forgotten your suitcase on a bus. And so it's like you're not as smart as you're cracked up to be in your own brain, sort of thinking, oh, at least I know how to travel. So basically I loved that story because it was very self-deprecating and I didn't see that coming.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very funny book. I think
It is
there's
a funny book.
probably 50% of what you would call accidents, like
Yeah,
travel accidents, mishaps, things that you did not intend for them to happen. They just happen and they become a funny story afterwards, like
yeah,
eating too much spice on the first night and
yeah.
then, spending
And you're
the
sitting on a
entire night
toilet
in the
the whole night.
toilet.
Yeah. And the other thing is that I thought was good about it, besides the self-deprecating part, was that um, for anybody who's traveled a lot, which I have, um, whenever you do, this is what it's like to go through security, then customs, and you're worried about, am I going to be taken into a little room and questioned closely? Of course, that gets into also being an expatriate, coming into a country where maybe you're not going to be welcome, but you have the whole travel thing down. So it is a good book to read if you have traveled a little bit in terms of just what happens. Um, and I wanted to just talk about this midnight jab chapter here. I got my first of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine May 21, 2021. Mundane as that may sound, everything about it was memorable. And you talk about that and why it was memorable. And the thing is, I can remember when I got my COVID shot, having isolated at home and unable to visit people. It was a big deal. It brought tears to my eyes. So I was so glad to have a COVID vaccine shot story in the book because, I could write my own COVID shot vaccine story, but I love that you just paid attention to that. He inquired when and why I left Venezuela and then lamented that Chavez got it all wrong. Idealism, he said, quoting a British novelist William Morris, was for the youth to dream, not for grown adults to govern a country. So I love that your story, this midnight jab story, turns into, you're talking about the midnight jab, but then you also talk with a man who kind of understood your situation. He was so deep into our conversation and so skilled in his craft that when the time came, neither of us could figure out where he'd actually injected me. He shrugged and stuck the commemorative band-aid wherever it landed at exactly 11:56 p.m. He then noticed my book title, Magical Christianity, and asked about it. After I explained it was about symbolism in Christianity, he told me the cover had a psychedelic quality. So he showed me an article he had published in that week's Lobes, I don't know the magazine, on psychedelics. Anyway, I just love that story because of the human connection you made with this guy giving you the shot, but also what a big deal getting COVID vaccines were. So I'm putting that in here because there's such a range of experiences.
Yeah, there's actually a range. Actually, when I started doing it, I started collecting them kind of like whenever they happened. There were some that I left out. And then eventually I always thought when I have around 30, I'm gonna
Yeah,
start putting them together. So eventually, like at first I just started doing it at random, but
yeah,
then I realized this is growing into a thing. I'm gonna pay more attention and do it a little bit more on an entertaining note because some of
yeah,
them, the ones that I left out, were not so entertaining. Um, so I conceptualized the book back in 2000, we're 25, 23. In
yeah,
my creative writing class, we had a peer review projects group, and like that we helped each other with conceptualization of projects. I conceptualized it there, and I realized I wanted to make it a primarily entertaining vehicle, but
yeah,
also the kind of book that would project people into their own stories. Like they
yeah,
would resonate, especially with someone who has traveled a lot. And for example, you remember the time you also got almost deported somewhere, or you
yeah,
remember the time that you ended up, I don't know, throwing up in a ferry
yeah.
in the Greek islands.
Getting seasick on the way on an hour and a half trip, clutching a vomit bag at the cruise
Yeah.
occasion. Yes, I
So
like that story. I'm going to
it's
read
a
that
bit
one out
like
loud to my wife, who always gets seasick. She has held the rail in many a boat, leaning over the
oh
side.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I thought that it would be nice to make it like a timestamp of
Yes.
this time where many of us share stories online, but
Yeah.
also, the kind of things that happened in the last decade. It's something that maybe right now you don't pay attention. Okay, like, okay, it's a funny story. But then in 10 years you look at it and you remember, oh wow, the pandemic was
Yeah,
there. Like for me, the trip to Brussels, getting out of Paris
yeah,
before confinement, it was pretty memorable. So I wanted to
yeah,
put that in print. And I really thought that by sharing those seemingly mundane stories, people
yeah.
would connect with their own travel stories.
Yeah, and you also bring up some interesting, just kind of philosophical human behavioral things, talking about how, in terms of sexuality and meeting people, but also just attitudes. You're sort of two different people. You're the person where you live, but then when you're on the road, this sort of vacation personality comes out and you're kind of a bit different. You're more open to things. I don't know if you sort of imply you're more promiscuous or something, but the implication is you're easier um, on yourself in some ways. And so there's some just basic human nature stuff that I felt to be very true there.
Yeah, kind of. I do think that is true. Not necessarily promiscuous, but more
Well, it's probably the wrong
risk-taking,
word.
more
Yeah.
relaxed. You are more adventurous. You try
Yeah.
things that you don't try at home. Uh, in a number of ways, just I did phrase it in a story that was about a one night hookup, I think.
Yes, yeah, you did. But here, like for instance, here you have overheard in Montmartre, you have the dentist told me he might need to desensitize one of my teeth. And you go on, you're back out in the street on the uh, on Rue Custine, is it?
I think
Two
it's
middle-aged schoolgirls caught my eye, one with pixie hair, the other an androgynous blur in blue marin. They were giggling, walking hand in hand, and then they're being followed by a couple of teenage boys who are lamenting the fact that these girls look like they're bisexual or something. And you're listening to this whole conversation, and the guys say to each other, "Seriously, bro, girls making out in the street after school? The world's gone crazy. I swear, I can't see life the same anywhere, same way anymore." Uh, the boy with the stick replied, and with that, they carried on down the street, leaving me oddly relieved, knowing that I'm no longer an impressionable teen. But then you finish with a great line. You say, "Thoughts and prayers to anyone raising kids in this day and age." In other words, the complexity of sort of gender issues, but also teenage attitudes, in a context in which you're not commenting on the morality of the situation. You're just saying, hey, things are changing very fast around us, and you have to have sympathy not just for the parents, but also the kids. And then note to self, get over the fear of going to the dentist. You survived braces, you can survive adulthood too. I love that because you're kind of you're looking at these kids with sympathy and also relating a story, and again without judgment. You're just saying, it isn't like and that's what I mean when I say, you're a feminist, but you don't come off like a feminist preaching at anybody, because here you are, you're not judging the two adolescent boys, you're just saying that's how they saw it, that's what these girls are doing it, and aren't all teenagers kind of silly and half formed, because both the girls and the boys are in the same boat, really, and it's sort of not,
yeah.
and I love that because as someone that has a lot to do with kids of that age, um with
Yeah, I do.
grandchildren,
I do just think I have friends that have younger kids than that, but I don't think I have any friends that have teenagers yet.
yeah,
But I do think, wow, that must be, it's a very different world. I just thought it was a funny idea because
it's a good
I
story.
think they were
Yeah,
like 12-year-olds, something like that. So they were
yeah,
so small and they were talking like in this
like big
grandiose.
grandiosity, big grand statements about, gender.
Yeah, my life's never gonna be the same. And
Yeah, I can never unsee this. Two girls
I
holding
can
hands in the
never
street.
unsee this. That's one thing. The other thing that the book has, because like when you were reading it, the book has some multilingualism sprinkled. That's
Yeah,
something that I did want to like capture as well because it's part of the reality of many people that live abroad or
sure.
travel. So it has a lot of multilingualism weaved. And when I posted that story, the one with the two boys in Montmartre, I remember I got so many comments about the wesh. I don't know if if you were familiar with that expression, but it's very typical with teen boys
Yeah,
in France. So yeah, it
which
has
I'm
a
not
lot of
familiar
like
with. So explain it.
I don't even know what it means. It's just a thing
Mais
that
c'est en français. Is it a French expression? On dit comment?
it's an Arab expression or like
Okay.
a French Arab expression. It's very typical in the South and also very typical in like teens who want to be like, you know,
Yeah.
they have flow in the way they talk. So it's like dude. I think that that's how
Yeah.
it's
Something like dude. Yeah.
expressed, like dude,
Between each other.
but
Yeah.
it's not, it doesn't mean dude, but I don't know
It's,
exactly how it's used, but you know the kind of personality when they're
yeah,
talking.
exactly. So then, let me go to a couple other things I wanted to get into. You have one, Vive la France. Relocating is at the beginning also a form of travel, what the French call a séjour. France in general and Paris in particular have a reputation for being romantic, refined, effortlessly cool, but beyond the postcards and Emily in Paris lies a different kind of French experience, a chaotic, gritty, glorious, unique reality, sidestepping the temptation to tell you about the constant strikes, rude waiters, or the time I saw a Togolese anti-genocide march accidentally merge with a zombies in full makeup Walking Dead parade in République. This section captures some aspects that have stood out to me about the unique flavor of everyday life in France. So the funny thing is, again, you come at this as an expatriate, sort of observing the life around you, but like de Tocqueville observed life in America, as in, as the foreigner, you're seeing it
Yeah.
more clear-eyed than a French person would because you're seeing sort of what's really there. And I love that about this book. In fact, you come to almost every situation as a foreigner because none of these places are Venezuela.
Yes.
So you are the foreigner everywhere, not just in
Everywhere.
France. And
Absolutely.
you bring that eye, you bring the
Yeah.
observer's eye to that. I don't know
Yeah.
if you want to comment on that.
No, but it's very much the flavor of a travel memoir. I think
Hmm.
that's the case. It is the observer character that is journeying, and because you are in a journey, you pay more attention. I think I say it at some point. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's the
yeah.
introduction where I say there's something about
But
the
you're
novel.
noticing the little things too.
Yes. There's something in the novelty of being somewhere new that you pay more attention, and you pay more
Yeah,
attention to mundane stuff, but also to like what the Marxists call superstructures,
yeah,
like the bigger thing that everyone seems to be like swimming in that water, but
yeah.
you're more aware of the water.
Well, they
Like
don't even see the water they're in because they're taking it for
exactly.
granted,
There's
and little things are
yeah.
jumping out at you that they're not even noticing because that's where they live, as it were.
Yeah, like for example, there's one in that Vive la France. There's
Yeah.
one about a casual stall, about one time that I walked into a teen girl pooping
Yes, I
in
remember that.
and
And she's like she's sitting in the stall with her pants pulled down and the whole bit, and just sort of shrugs at you like, "Hey, what c'est la vie? What do you want?
c'est la vie. It's like the
This is no
most
big deal."
nonchalant thing you've ever seen.
Yeah, and she's not shy or embarrassed or anything. And you're as a non-French woman encountering a younger woman caught in a toilet with her, everything pulled down while she's sitting there on the toilet. She hadn't bothered to lock the door. She's so cool about it that I guess, you come away maybe with a different impression of her, or at least the reaction you expected isn't going to happen. So like it's this cool younger kid who just could care less about that.
But I made it into a whole like bigger reflection of how the French are so nonchalant. Like it's real. It's not only that girl. It's a very big cultural trait.
Yeah.
So
And how
yeah,
do you
that
explain that, by the way, as an outsider's outsider in France? And first of all, how would that differ with Venezuela? Because in Switzerland, of my youth, in nobody would be that nonchalant. You locked the door, you didn't mess up that sort of thing.
yeah.
And the Swiss are very uptight people. And I think today they might be a little more nonchalant, but they're not France. I mean, I love the story because usually you think of French nonchalance about sex or drinking or, whatever.
Yeah.
But you tell it by walking in on a teenager who's sitting on a toilet, and it's like she just shrugs and like, ah, je m'en fous.
Je m'en fous. Exactly. That's exactly it. I think it's just that it's a general attitude. And I think I say it at some in that piece about the Cartesian logic or something.
Yeah.
that. I think it's a bigger thing. It's not just about, oh, being liberal. It's just like nothing is about, like, nothing should stir too much emotion.
Yeah. I mean, it's a matter of principle.
It's a matter of principle. Yeah.
Yeah. And being cool is like the point. It's not. Yeah, yeah, no, I totally got it. And one thing just to ch change the subject here slightly away from the book, but to you personally, and what underlines this book is this outside sort of de Tocquevillian observer of the world and everything in it. Um, this kind of outsider perspective. I think one reason I like the book so much is that you capture that outsider perspective so well. And as someone who grew up in this weird missionary family in Switzerland, then fled that evangelical background, came to America, but having been raised in Switzerland, gone to British boarding schools, I didn't. We were these weird Americans in a Swiss village and didn't belong in the village. And then I'm the one Yank, as they called me, in the British boarding school. So I'm the one American there. And then I moved to the States, having been raised in Europe, having abandoned the evangelical background. I've been on my own journey. And so, as someone who's been on a very different journey to you, I get the emotion of the outsider perspective.
Mm.
So, I think one reason I really like this book so much is I share that with you because I always am standing there looking at what's around me. Oh, this is, I've been here since 1980, living in America, and I'm still sort of saying, oh, well, I guess this is how they do it in the States. And I've been here 45 years, but I'm still looking at it like an outsider, as an observer. And I
Yeah.
really felt that in your book. And I'm just telling you up front that never goes away. You can stay in France 50 years and you're still going to be looking at it as an outsider.
Yeah. I think I saw that in the book after writing it.
Yeah,
Because I wrote each piece
yeah,
in the moment. Usually like the very same day when it happened, I I don't think I realized that that voice was so present up
yeah,
until the end because
yeah,
there's always this first because in the moment I am outside. So as you're saying, every like most stories not even take place in France. Some of them take place in India or they
no, no,
take
they're
place
all over the
in
place
Spain.
because you've traveled so much.
So they're like also because my career has been so much in international relations. So like
Yeah,
there's a bit of like Bolivia or whatever. But there's also that perspective of constantly being somewhere where you're not.
yeah,
And so
exactly.
like constantly playing the rules that like stretching. There's one that I really like where I'm eating in Barcelona, I'm eating
Yeah,
breakfast. And it's a savory breakfast, and I have this French couple next to me bitching about it because the French only have sweet breakfast.
yeah,
And so the woman is criticizing the fact that I'm eating savory breakfast, and it's just like this when you're used to traveling and you're used to you've uprooted yourself from somewhere
sure.
and then you've gone somewhere else, you learn a lesson that you cannot unlearn, which
Yeah,
is there are things that are just arbitrary rules that became a convention, and unless you've been somewhere where those rules don't apply,
yeah,
you will never know that they are just, they're not sacrosanct. Like they
yeah,
are not sacred. They
yeah,
are simply something that became established and that it has
yeah,
no superiority over anyone else's.
yeah.
And that's something that once you learn, you cannot unlearn it.
Yeah,
So
well, an
that
example
is
being that
present.
my daughter who lived and works in Italy and still has an office there, was saying that it took living in Italy to be told enough times that you don't ever order a cappuccino after 11 in the morning. You order in a cafe, which is an espresso, and you don't eat salad with your pizza, etc. One story that I think will resonate with a lot of people is this last call for Nashville because it's a good travel story. And you talk about trying to get on a plane when you're late. Sir, I have a connection at 4 p.m. I insist. Earlier, when I tried to tell him, he dismissed me. Well, then the story follows all the way through, and you're telling one person after another, Sir, I have a flight at 4 p.m. I repeat, he blinks theatrically. Y'all got a flight boarding at 4 or leaving at 4? Leaving at 4. Yo, he shouts to his partner, stay here. I'm a taker through. And so, you make your flight, but um, note to self at the end of this is book connecting flights with more than a 2 hour buffer and maybe train for a 5K just in case. So I love that story. It's a great travel story and it's set in the world we all know about when we've run for flights and been late or connections are screwed up or whatever. So um, I want to just go from that to this. I go back into this idea that you're seeing things as this outsider. Um, this is personal now, but is there any place you feel at home? Because you're in Paris as a Venezuelan refugee, if you want to put it that way. It's dramatic. And you weren't exactly a refugee. You didn't claim refugee status, but you were still fleeing the collapse of a whole system, which would have endangered you if you had stayed.
Mm.
Um, and I'm not asking this rhetorically because it's the same question I ask myself, both philosophically in terms of my kind of half-hearted atheism on one end, and then sort of being in America, but as someone who grew up somewhere else, a former evangelical, but not anymore. Um, so I'm kind of asking you, uh, person to person, not writer to writer so much, but is there any place you feel at home, as in like, this is I do in my inside my own house now.
I was gonna give you the same answer. Um, inside home. I think you create home as a foreigner who
Yeah,
relocates. I don't think you will ever that's my experience and I've seen it with so many friends in different places. I don't think you ever like fully reinsert yourself. There's always going to be a part of you that
yeah.
is missing a part of the culture because it's like it's a actually, in the last story of my last book,
Yeah,
Alejandra,
yeah.
there's a monologue in there where she says transiting nationalities or changing nationalities
Mm.
is kind of like changing gender identity. There's a
Yes,
part of
sure.
you that is so structural that you have to deconstruct and
Yeah,
realize there's more to this,
yeah,
but I cannot undo the fact that this is my past.
yeah,
So there's a sunk cost or like an investment of having grown up in a part of the world where you have a certain set of values, a certain set of cultural identities or structures, and then you relocate, you realize you can create your own home in your own house,
yeah,
but I think there's always a gap wherever you go. So when I fly into Paris, if I've been somewhere else and I fly into Paris, I feel home. Like
yeah,
I have that feeling of okay, I
yeah,
don't have to like double think anything. I know where everything else.
yeah,
I know like where to go. I don't have to think about the rules. I know where I'm navigating. It's my comfort zone. If I go to Spanish speaking countries, that's also like a relatively easy feeling
mhm,
because there's not too much friction in the
yeah.
cultural interaction. However, there's always a gap. Absolutely
But
always a gap.
I think there's also a gap in another way, and I'm asking you again how you feel about this. I think one of the things, you can't get inside other people's heads and see how they see the world. And, you always assume other people are the same as you or different in other ways. But I'm wondering if people who are born and brought up in one place, and stay there for a whole life, um, and don't change religions or genders or leave, or any of this. They're just there, as I think and love about some Italians I know in the village they're in. And, there are people who have just been there. They're happy with their culture. They don't vacation anywhere either. Even the ones with the money, they don't go places. They go to the coast in Italy because why would you leave Italy if you're in Italy? I mean, nobody else has anything to offer that's better. And they know that.
Yeah.
Everybody else wants to go somewhere else. Italians just go stay in Italy.
Yeah.
Um, but what I was going to say to you is, I think, for me anyway, is that you always imagine that an insider's insider who's always been somewhere and is comfortable in their own skin and hasn't made all those changes doesn't observe everything as closely. They're just living there. Whereas if I'm in a small Italian village and I go get my morning coffee, and I'm enjoying the village as a village. I'm observing the three old guys on the bench and I'm thinking about, oh, they spent their whole life here. And I want to talk to them, find out what's that like. But, um, you'd have to live your life over again to really enter into their settled existence of how that can be. And I felt that in the village I left in Switzerland, where there were the farmers who had been there their whole life and they hadn't even gone to the town in the valley.
Yeah, no, I share that with you. I reflect on this constantly. Like
But you're an observer
sometimes,
all the time. Are other people looking at everybody in a restaurant and starting to write a story in their head, or observing, oh, they're doing this, or, you know, most of us walk into somebody in a toilet and they haven't locked the door, but, we don't make a cultural observation out of their reaction.
well, there's two things in there. There's the writer's brain, which I think it's one thing, and you're always like putting everything into words and trying to like create a short story about everything. That's like a kind of brain. There's a kind of brain that needs to do that.
Yeah.
And then there's the observer that lives in an outside culture and is making specifically cultural observations. But I used to do that kind of observation about other things when I lived in Venezuela. So I do think the proneness to write makes you an observant anywhere. Like
Yeah.
you have your typical or comedians as well, your typical comedian, like, what's up with? And then they'll do observational comedy. There's a lot of observational comedy in this book as
Yeah,
well.
no, there is,
Why
there
it
is.
stands out.
Yeah, but the thing is that I have to say about it, and let's plug it again. This is Unfiltered. It's our August offering in our book club. It has to be read by Amanda Quintero, and it's from the feed to the page, stories of wanderlust. But the thing is about this book that is, the chief subject that you are observing is yourself and
Yes.
how you're reacting. And
Oh, yes.
and I'm not trying to put you on the spot here or try to be clever or, this is not a clickbait question, but I found one of the interesting things is in terms of your own sexual experiences with different people and over a different time frame. I'm going to ask you two questions, which you invite because you've written about it. One is your own view of sexuality different than the way you were raised? And again, I'm willing to talk about my own life in that regard. I wrote a book called Sex, Mom, and God, by the way, which sold well. People wanted to know of how my mother's view of sexuality and the piety of the evangelical background, and then how that developed. So I'm not asking you to talk about stuff that I haven't been willing to write things about myself about, and you've
Okay.
written about your own sexuality here. So one is, has your in terms of having sex with this guy who has a hair bun, and you talk about and he thanks you for a blowjob, whatever the first story in the book. Um, is this something that you feel comfortable with in terms of how you were, the kind of sexuality that you were raised with, or is that a departure from that? That's question one. Question two is where you're really different than me is I didn't grow up with these phones and posting and tweeting and all this. I've come to that because I have Ernie Gregg, my producer, who's doing this show for me, and I'll send him stuff and say, post this everywhere. And the most I'll do is put something on Twitter once in a while or send him a video to post. But I don't go around with my phone. My phone to me is a camera, a phone, and a machine to text with. I don't use any of the apps except the travel app on the map. I don't post anything. I'm still the old fashioned guy in that I have a producer that posts stuff for me, and I only do it to keep alive people out there who are interested in what I'm saying. But I'm not following every wrinkle of my life saying last night, we had sex and here's how it went and blah, blah, blah. And you're posting all this. So there's two things I want to ask is how were you raised in terms of sexual ethics or none? And how does this fit with your vision as a writer who turns a book out to also be a young enough person to be part of this weird generation you're part of that's always sitting there with you're observing people with phones, but you're using the phone yourself. I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's strange to me. It's like you might as well be from another planet.
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
you as a young woman, no problem. I understand young women. What I don't get is this thing of you got a phone and it's this thing to share your life with. It's like what? Write a book, take a year, send it to a publisher. Maybe it comes out, maybe it doesn't, but it's not instant.
Well, I think the first one is very straightforward because I did grow up in an uptight Latin American Hispanic context. So actually like sexuality was as vanilla as it gets where I grew up. Um, Funnily enough, that story, like it really happened, but the time when I put it down to writing is because I was part of a creative writing class. And that week, the week when this happened, we were going over erotica or something like that. I don't remember what it was because
Yeah,
I was part
something.
of this workshop where
Yeah,
we had to we changed genres every week for about a year, something like
yeah,
that. And it just happened to coincide that I lived through this and then I had that class, I believe the same week or a couple of weeks after. And at that point, I was attending a lot of open mics. So I finished it out. I fleshed it out completely for the purpose of going to an open mic and
yeah,
reading it out loud and getting a
yeah.
reaction. And then I revamped it for that purpose. So I would say that text is the very first time that I ever wrote something like that and that I shared it. Like it was a moment when I went from like, okay, this is the kind of thing that lives in my private life that I
Yeah,
could have definitely told a few girlfriends in a drinks night.
yeah,
But because I was going through that specific conjunction, let's call it, it just
yeah,
became a piece, and then I realized, you know what, it's a good piece. It's a piece that like creates entertainment. It's a piece that is a little bit feminist. It creates a stand in and of itself just by being it. And
yeah.
when I read the collection, I was like, this is one of the strongest pieces. Actually, I want to make it the first one because it does tell the flavor of what's going to come next. That's one thing. And then the other part is I do live on my phone. Like I've worked on my phone. Like I think my entire work life has happened on the phone.
Were you living on your phone in Venezuela? My tech dates mixed up with your life dates. I can't picture what you would have been doing. I forget when everything happened, but
Yes. So I think I opened my first social media when I was in college.
which was
So
when,
I'm
I'm sorry to
just
nail
like
you down, but
Facebook generation. So
okay, yeah.
2000, I want to say 2007. I
'Cause
opened.
the fact that you're posting stuff, I find as shocking as a grandmother would find, my grandmother would have found, some of the thing. In other words, it's like basically you've been to the moon, you walked on the moon, you are a really different animal. So basically the people I interview on here are writers or they're musicians, whatever. I'm not saying they don't live on their phones too, but they're either a little older than you or they haven't written a book, which also was stuff
Yeah.
you posted. The
And
fact
I
that
wanted to
these are
honor that.
what's that?
I wanted to honor it. It
No,
is
you did it
part
great.
of the
You're
reason.
making me rethink the phone thing. I don't hate phones as much as I did when I started this book. It's like, well, wait, and man, Amanda does this, and she's a good writer, so maybe I have to change my mind here or something.
I think there's an entire aspect of younger people's lives. I would say millennial and down.
Yeah,
We spend such a big part of our lives online. It's not just on the phone. It's the fact that you develop an entire lingo for participating in online culture. There's the memes, there's the hashtags, there's the way you communicate. Like I was texting over like the text messages started when I was a teenager. So like you develop an entire like way to write texts
so
that
is
are
this a cautionary tale for parents saying if you let your teenager have a phone, they're going to turn out like Amanda Quintero? Look at this. Look what she's written and her first
I
story in here, and she's willing to
I I
share this.
I
Let
cannot make
that be
that
a warning.
I cannot make that promise or warning. I can just say it's something that is a fact of life. You know, it's
Yeah,
like
no, and I love that. I mean, as this old guy, raising kids and grandchildren and all the rest, it was like a peek into another world because obviously, I have an iPhone 16, I know all about it, but I use it for what I use it, and then I have children and grandchildren who use it more, but I haven't read a book yet. I mean, I've read 50 or 60 books to just do this podcast for, and I've never read one that has to do with phone use, where these
yeah,
are all like little posts from your phone thing. So basically,
online life.
this is a first.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to do that. I thought it was like, okay, I want to document the fact that it has become an aspect of our lives. And it's very meta in that sense because also in the like on in inside the book, I'm talking about dating apps, which is an entire culture,
I know you
or
do, sure. Yeah.
I'm quoting TikTok, or I'm talking about Instagramming something,
But I
or
have a
you know, like
practical question for you. Is there any way to break through this sort of wall to the people who are like you, who aren't reading anymore because they're doing what you're doing. They're posting it all on phones and they're not reading books. And you're trying to be a writer and you still want to be published and have paper or on Kindle or something. You want
Yeah.
people to do more than just read your texts.
Yes, yes, I did want to bridge that gap. I
Well, how are
think
you going to bridge it? And I'm asking my producer, Ernie, who manages all my public stuff, to take notes here. How do we get anybody to read my next book, Ernie? When they're all just tweeting. I've done it in tiny short. By the way, I loved your short sections because I've been working on a book for 5 years, and I think the longest section in the book is like 6 pages, and they're all literally a half a page or a page and a half. And
yeah,
there's no
that's
chapter headings. It's just divided into short. And basically, it's to. But you know, are we all deluding ourselves, including you, because you're a writers group smart girl, and
I
you're not
think
just a text person?
I don't think so, but I think it is its own thing. Like there I have a poem to Google Maps in this book.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like representing that reality because I think writers and people who like to read a lot tend to be a bit romantic in trying to cling to the traditional means, whatever that
But are
whatever
they
that.
on their phones when they're not reading?
But they are, of
No,
course,
no, I'm talking
everyone
about
is.
young people. I know they are because I see them. This includes my youngest grandchildren. But I'm just saying,
But it is a it I don't know if people are truly losing the ability to read. I don't know. Like I don't know. Or if it's just that they're consuming content in a different format.
yeah,
And whenever you want it, like it depends on what audience you're going for. Like today, I finished a book about the CIA book club that the CIA run a book club or funded a book club in Poland as part of the entry point to the Eastern
yeah,
Bloc. And they poured millions of dollars into this. And I was like, the whole time I kept thinking this would be impossible in Latin America because people don't read. I mean, people know how to read, but people don't
exactly.
have the interest in running an entire underground operation just to publish books and read books about dissidents. That would never happen in Latin
Right.
America. So it also takes like understanding who is the audience and what do they enjoy consuming to get a point across, I
Well,
think.
there's a diminishing reading public. I mean, just talk to publishers about what's going on and, writers. And, when you're pitching a new book of mine, for instance, the publisher always wants to know, get Ernie Gregg, my producer, to write up a thing about my online footprint right now because that they want you to use all that. So, there's kind of a diminishing return on the written word. And
Mm.
university, even Ivy League universities in America are saying they're getting trouble, that it's a lot if you can get people to read 8 books a year. And it used to be you read 8 books a week, not quite a week, but every
Mm.
couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's definitely a change in there. I don't think I wanted to make a statement on that. I just wanted to I wanted to put the online into a printed book in this because mostly because I do think this is more permanent.
Yeah.
We never know what's going to happen
But the
with
other
social
thing is,
media.
and we'll get out of this because I've gotten too bogged down in this whole discussion. But what I want to say is that what interested me so much about your book as a work of literature, Unfiltered, from the feed to the page, Stories of Wanderlust, is that, and available everywhere, and it'll be in our book club. I'm interested in it for a couple of reasons. One, from a literary point of view, it's a really great book. I mean, you're a good writer. The other thing is it's terrific because you've elevated this form. In other words, if its roots are in phones, as someone of my generation, I don't take stuff that comes for phones or out of phones very seriously. But on the other hand, you're a good advertisement for living as an exhibitionist, posting everything about yourself on a phone. It's like that, like, get the hell off your phone and live a little. But actually, if this comes out of it, that is a good counter argument. It's like, wait a minute, wait a minute. I know a real writer who wrote all her stuff, posted it online first, and this is a real book. So
Yeah,
it's
I
kind of
do.
it's. I'll tell you what my experience is like. It's the first
Yeah.
time It's like the first time I read a good graphic novel. It's like, I'm not
Mm.
going to read a comic. I enjoyed comic books when I was a kid, but don't tell me to start reading and then you read a really good one, or you look at the pic and you're saying, no, no, this is actually something. So if someone had said to me, here's a book of stuff that originated with phone posts and texts on where did you post? Because you
On
tell,
Instagram. On
yeah,
Instagram.
Instagram. And see, to try, like, to my generation, it's like, how am I supposed to take a book seriously that started on Instagram?
But I
I'm,
do think there's two things in what you said that I want to like pull back and like expand on. I do
yeah,
think I elevated the post. Like I did take the raw material of whatever because Instagram and social media in general tends to be very on the spot.
yeah,
This
I
is
know.
happening,
Yeah,
and it's very journalistic in nature. I am reporting this almost.
right.
I took it as a creative venture because I had blogged for like 10 years before.
Sure.
Like before Instagram, or no, I think even when Instagram came around, but by the time I started doing this, I had spent about 10 years blogging. The blog died, and Facebook basically died as a social
Yeah,
media. So I kind of knew that Instagram was not going to be forever. I don't know if it will be forever, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking
sure.
I outlived the
Yeah.
blog as a form and the Facebook page feed as a form. So I want to like capture this essence, number one. But then when I put it on the page, I did edit it for the
Yeah, of
page.
course you did. I mean, it's a piece of writing. I'm just saying the origin is interesting because it's like I wouldn't have figured a good book would come out of that. So I was wrong.
Well, I think if you are truly interested in the contemporary, you have to tinker a little bit with the stuff
I
that
totally agree with you. And I do
is
too,
going on.
which is why we're doing this, by the way, because it's like
Yeah.
and I'm not doing this podcast to just it's not all about me. This is actually about you and it's about all the authors I talk to. But, and again, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think where anybody who needs a handle on what this book, the value of this book, has got to read your thing about waking up in the morning without your sanitary pads or whatever, tampons, because that's not only a good story, but it's kind of, it's a story a woman writes, a younger woman writes that could be online that makes a point that's a real issue, but at the same time, it's not written as an issue. So I think, and I don't want to sound strange or odd about doing this. I think more than sort of some of the sexual experiences, because you've read about sex before and you've read about things before, and you read different people's point of view. But I think in a funny way, it's a very funny book and it's really poignant, but it also has a really serious edge to it. So if I meet, for instance, if I'm doing a talk in 3 weeks in a university and I'm talking to people who want to be writers, and a woman says to me, tell me about some interesting younger women who are writing that I could read their work. This would be one of the first things I'd mention. I'm
Wow.
serious.
That's great.
I'd plug your book in a hot minute anywhere to any group of writers and say, if you want to know, if you want to be hopeful about, quote, this younger generation from a point of view of an old 72-year-old guy who's written some books and so forth, hey, and this came out of phone stuff. And look, it's a good book.
That's I'm just grateful to hear you say that.
You're making me more optimistic.
That's great. That if that happened, if that's what came out of it, like I am content. I am
Well,
content.
there
Like
you
I
are.
put my squinting face in
Yes, and it's very
the
cute.
cover of it.
Yeah, but it's a good book. So we're going to have this as our offering on our book club in August. And in the meantime, before we go away, and we haven't done justice to the book at all, we've been sort of jokey and talking about it. But I want to thank you for a well-written book. I really enjoyed it. Um, I'm going to keep it to hand. I'm serious. I'm going to recommend it to other people. I do talk to other people who are trying to write, doing stuff. I'm going to say, look, just it'll only take you it's a short book. Just sit down. This is what writing can be in this day and age, and a point of departure you wouldn't expect. So I really recommend it. The other thing is, before we go, is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of like how, I mean, we're going to plug the book, but is there anything else you want to say that I didn't ask you or we didn't get said or you think I've misinterpreted your book or whatever?
Not at all. I think it's been a great conversation. Honestly, I was not expecting. Honestly, when I sent it, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not sure that," because we had such an intense political conversation last time
Yeah, we were serious people before.
we were so we were serious people. And when I hit send, I was like, "I'm not sure how this is gonna go." Honestly, I was a bit I don't know, hesitant walking into
Yeah,
this conversation, and it's gone beautifully. I think
but
the the biggest the biggest, like, I don't know, proud moment in this is that you have reflected back to me a lot of things that I consciously did in the editing of this book and the
yeah,
putting it together,
yeah,
and the fact that someone as, let's say, distant in certain aspects of our life
sure.
stories has recognized it. It means that I did the job that I
You
wanted to
did
do,
the
that
job.
came across,
Yeah,
and that is out there, and that is clear enough that someone else with no background and having read something so different before that I wrote,
yeah.
um, has perfectly understood
Well,
what I
also
wanted to
been
say.
vastly entertained by it.
And especially for me, it was mostly
So
a product
entertaining.
for entertainment. So if you
Yes.
pick that up,
And it
I
never bogged down. I mean, I read every word of every page and I never felt like, oh, I'll hurry through this one because I don't, this isn't my sort of a thing. There was plenty in there that's not my sort of thing because I'm not a young woman looking for tampons and I'm not getting, whatever. But you wrote it so entertainingly. You just pulled me through every single story. It was fantastic.
I do have then a question, because you said that you didn't think you were gonna like the poetry. Did you think it
No,
was
no,
like,
I read I actually picked a poem out that I wanted you to read. Let's finish with that. We've got a minute here, so let's go to that. I wanted you to go to Grab Your Pills and read that one
oh,
because I
yeah,
thought that was I mean, they're all good poems. I actually enjoyed it, but Grab Your Pills is, why don't you read Grab Your Pills? Both, it's short. It'll just take 2 minutes and then we'll finish with that one.
yeah. So
Recommended to listen, Grab Your Pills. It
grab
starts
your
up, wells up
grab
in
your
your
pills.
throat, page 126.
Yes, grab your pills was written during a. Oh, yeah, I think I have a typo here, but it was written on a story that I told earlier in the book.
Yeah. So go ahead
Um,
and
the,
read it.
the recommended read is Llévame en un beso,
Hmm.
and it goes like this. It wells up in your throat, pounding fast like ritual drums, beating, heart screaming, crying old, forgotten sorrows. Skeletons come out to dance, lured by the inner night, summoned by the moon, chanting spells dyed in maroon, conjuring the cruel ghost of past hurts. She clutches a cold hand, flashing a sinister smile. You thought you could think your way out of here? She says, shaking her head. You better weep and fetch your pills. Probing a finger knuckle deep inside a wound you didn't know still seeped.
Good
Note to
poem.
self. May you never have to fly again in the middle of a panic attack. That was a poem that I wrote during a panic attack on a
Yeah.
flight.
Yeah. I loved it. And what were the pills, by the way?
Anxiety medication.
Okay. All right. Are you still taking them or are you good to go now?
No, I'm off those. I'm starting to taper off the antidepressants, so also.
Well, you keep writing like this and you can taper right off all the antidepressants because you're a really good writer. And I love this book. And Unfiltered I would recommend it literally to anybody and not especially to, and then you fill in the demographic that'll get it. I'm saying, 70, I'll be 73 in August, 73-year-old guy, totally different life experience. It was great. It was like going to a different planet. And I loved it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Frank.
Yeah, and seriously, stay on when I go off here to talk to Ernie a little bit so that you can conspire together on how we can promote this for you.
Amazing.
All right, much love. Seriously, I love this
Much
book.
love. Thank you very
Oh, and
much.
I love the other book too, but Unfiltered was pure pleasure. I mean,
Yes,
there's serious
I
things in
know
it, but
it.
I just read it, it was like eating chocolate. It was great.
Absolutely.
All right, much love. Bye.
Thank you very much.